Good evening. If we can call the June 8th, 2023 Fire Commission meeting to order, could you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge of allegiance flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. All commissioners are here. Koblak, Kelsey, Cornfeld, Bringard, Bletcher. Additions or deletions to the agenda? Are there any? And the only thing I would say is that under approval of the minutes, we have multiple meeting minutes. Kevin, we have May 11th meeting minutes, May 23rd meeting minutes, and May 30th meeting minutes. So we'll approve 3 sets of meeting minutes tonight. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda? If not, a motion would be in order.
So moved.
Moved by Jerry. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Dallas. Questions, comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Say nay. Motion carried. Approval of the agenda has been completed. The next thing on the agenda is the interview of the applicant for a full-time fire chief. Just for those that might be watching, Fire Commission made a recommendation to the Township Board to appoint interim Chief Camilleri to full-time. The board has asked that we conduct an interview of Mr. Camilleri. May 23rd, we had a special meeting. We interviewed 2 candidates. May 30th, we did have our special meeting and made the recommendation. On May 31st, Township Board had a special meeting and made that request upon us. So Commission thought it made sense to have the interview, have the process the very same as we have with the other 2 candidates. Interim Chief Camilleri has agreed to be interviewed tonight, and as a result of it, it's on the agenda as part of our Fire Commission meeting. So, Interim Chief, if you're ready to go, you can go from this side to that side.
Ready to go.
For the Commission, we will proceed in the same fashion we did with the other applicants. There's a set of standard questions that we pose to the other 2 candidates. We'll be doing the very same thing for Interim Chief Camilleri. Everybody has a set of those questions. We will roll them through the commission like we did last time. So Jerry, we're going to start with you on your side, and then we'll go through each question per commissioner once Interim Chief is ready to go.
All set, John?
I'm all set.
Thank you for coming tonight. You've given us a very detailed resume, but I think for the benefit of those who may be watching on television, that maybe you could just summarize what you've told us in your...
On my resume, Jerry, I just couldn't hear you too well.
Correct, yes. Yeah, just summarize it if you would.
All right. Well, my personal summary is, which first starts out my resume, is that I'm an active leader in the fire department. I have responded to 4,800 EMS calls on Groseal, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the last few days, weeks, I performed CPR. I have assisted in the administration of albuterol. I've been in the back of the rig, given reports, assessment reports to doctors. I'm involved in the day-to-day operations of the fire department. I have been for 7 months. I am a motivational individual. I believe that to be a mentor in the Groseal Fire Department, you have to transfer your skills by having your other EMTs and officers see you perform. You're going to ask them to get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're going to have insomnia when they get home. It's a brutal schedule. They need to see their chief do the same thing. These are volunteers. So that's part of mentoring, and that's primarily what I spoke about in my professional summary. I believe I'm a multitasker. You have to be in the Groseal Fire Department. I don't have battalion chiefs. I don't have captains. I don't have lieutenants. I don't have sergeants on staff waiting for me to provide them with orders and instruction. They go to their jobs at Ford Motor Company, Chrysler, GM, wherever they may go, between 8 and 5, and I'm there pretty much with Kevin doing all of the day-to-day operations. All right. I've been on 960 fire calls on Grosjean. My EMS and fire education consists of Fire 1 and Fire 2, EMT 1, EM2, and EMT National Registry. I have multiple hazmat certificates. I have multiple flashover training certificates, multiple pump operation certificates, multiple electrical safety certificates, multiple FEMA operations and management system certificates. And even though I'm a Michigan State grad, I've also been trained by the University of Michigan Life Flight Department, and I have a certificate in landing zone preparation and patient transportation operation. I was trained right here in this airport by their helicopter and their staff. One of their staff members at the time did live on Grosjean. We contacted them. Actually was a friend of mine, still is a friend of mine. We contacted him, and he arranged to have that life flight training, and I proudly have the certificate on my wall at my home. So that is my education. In 2016, I wrote a letter to Duncan Murdoch and asked him if I could join the fire department. They put me through a rigorous interview. They explained to me, the members there explained to me that you don't do this on your free time. This is your time. And so having a strong work ethic, I took it on. And I was a EMT firefighter for 6 years. Our SOG at the fire department states that you are not allowed to be an officer until 5 years on the force. I think that's a good thing. The demands of pulling these calls is significant, and before you can become an officer, you have to show that you can be a mentor. Well, you have to be a mentor. You have to be there making calls. So from 2012 to 2015, I was a sergeant, continuously making a lot of calls, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was tasked with inspecting equipment, maintaining equipment, fire equipment, EMS equipment, ambulances, attending instruction, providing instruction to EMS classes and fire classes. I was responsible for cleanup, maintenance of our own clothing, and I was responsible for rate and run reports and fire reports. My duties increased from 2015 to 2017. I was made a lieutenant. Again, I continued to make calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, learning my skills. When I first came out of the fire department, they were really passionate. There were no egos. And instruction in the fire department is passed down throughout the ranks. I continued to hone my skills. I continued to become acclimated with the specifics of Grosjean. I've been trained on that fuel farm specifically to learn. I've been trained to shut off that fuel farm manually, and I've been trained to shut it off with the breaker box electrically. So my tasks and my duties continued to increase. I responded to fire calls, smoke calls, odor investigations, CO alarms, electrical transmission wire down, and tree removal. Again, I have been inspecting and providing maintenance to the equipment of the Grosjean Fire Department now about 16 years. As my role increased, I was charged with maintaining the fire apparatus, everything from refueling, engine oil, engineer logs, apparatus clean, apparatus inventoried, apparatus equipment inventory, loaded and ready for service. From 2017 to 2019, I was the deputy chief of the Grosjean Volunteer Fire Department. Again, your duty to make calls, EMS calls, does not end with the rank as you get higher in the department. You continue to make calls. That is necessary for the volunteer fire department to operate. And you're charged with that responsibility. Our SOGs clearly state that the chiefs, the lieutenants, the captains are all responsible to make 30% of the night calls. Well, when you make those calls, you are responsible to provide EMS, no matter what your rank is. So as I continued through obtaining a higher and higher rank, I always held myself to the duties that I took on when I first came to the department. Provide EMS. 95% of our calls are EMS, the ambulances. So if we're going to provide a service, the chief, the lieutenants, and the captains are going to have to know that their duties are EMS. Especially in the time that we're dealing with today, when we're dealing with such a labor shortage, let's say demand. So again, from 2017 to 19, I was the deputy chief. In 2019 to 2022, I was the assistant chief. My duties continued. I was tasked with coordinating specialized training, such as the use of the JAWS extraction tools, the use of generators, the use of specialized power tools, and the use of the watercraft and equipment, the fan boat, and the Wolf inflatable. I was also charged with administrative duties, such as personnel matters, such as discipline, promotions, equipment purchases, training and instruction, bid specifications for new equipment, budget preparation, and grant procurement. Last year, we obtained a grant, and I credit especially Tim Lorraine for being the point man. On that, we had all 32 SCBAs replaced by the grant, and that was a regional grant. I just copied the board for a grant to pay for our 25-year-old fire helmets. Okay? I think I CC'd the commission on that. Now that's a grant, that's a unique grant. In that case, we can buy the helmets now, purchase those helmets, and we can get the grant money to reimburse us. So that grant, we'll have an action item with the commission on that next month. So those became my greater administrative duties. Now, since 2022 of November to the current, I am the interim chief. My duties, again, ditto, make EMS calls, provide EMS, respond to fire calls, smoke investigations, odor investigations, CO alarms, electrical transmission wire downs, and fire, and tree removal. I'm proud to say in February of 2023, there was a state of emergency on Groseal due to the extreme weather. Individually, my home was without power for 6 days. The fire department, and I'm going to give you a real good comparison. The fire department responded to 73 calls in approximately 36 hours. Electrical fires, wires down, wires on houses, trees blocking roadways. At the same time, we were able to divert resources and respond to EMS calls. I was personally on a call at 4 o'clock in the morning to a cardiac call. Proud to be there. But the fire department, under my leadership, was able to divert resources and get to those EMS calls that were continuously coming in as the entire crew was preventing all sorts of havoc on Groseal. Here's the comparison. Woodhaven had 3 during the same period of time. Groseal had 72. I was astonished. And I think there are other municipalities that had 0. So I'm glad to have been the leader at that time. And remember, I'd only been the chief for about 3 months, getting to know a lot more than there was a lot to know that I didn't know, but I learned it, and I am proud to put that on my resume, or in my history. The ladies and gentlemen of the fire department responded beautifully. They took days off. They avoided what was going on at their own homes. I did, to some degree. And they proudly served Groseal. Now, if we can motivate those people to do such a service today, that's why I'm here now. So, since 2022, the November, I've been the interim chief. And I want to say I thank the board for giving me this opportunity. I got a text from Derek, and he said, "Can you take a phone call?" He gave me that chance. They gave me that chance, and I thank them. Now, as to fire department committees, I'm on these are some of them. Bravo 1 Ambulance Purchase and Specifications Committee, Bravo 2 Ambulance Purchase and Specifications Committee, Engine 2 Purchase and Specifications Committee, Self-Contained Breathing Apparatus, SCBA Purchase and Specifications Committee, EMT Committee, and the Groseal Fire Department Discipline Appeal Board Committee. That's a short synopsis of my resume. I did promise Carl that this would be as short as possible, so if I go on, just stomp on me a little bit and I can take orders. So that's my resume.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Dallas, some of these questions, obviously, they might seem a little bit out of sort just because of what you just said, but you can answer them any way you want. If you want to say that you've already answered those and you're good with it, we can move on to the next question.
Sure.
Dallas, go ahead. Sure.
Where did you learn the job, and why do you have interest? Like, you haven't told us that yet.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Well, I learned of the job by, basically, I've always known that we've had a volunteer fire department, and I kind of had a transition of life in my 20s and 30s. You're youthful, and you express yourself in various ways. As I got older, I kind of felt like life is passing me by. I want to make a intentional difference in Groseal. I didn't want to get into politics, and I said, well, let's join the fire department. And I wrote a letter to Duncan, and they interviewed me. I think that answers your question. Why do I have an interest? Well, I have an interest in this job because now it's been 7 months, and that's great. We all have to do our legwork. But now that 7 months has occurred, I think we've made some great progress on the fire department. And I want that momentum to continue. I live on Groseal. I want to provide my neighbors, my friends, and my family with the great service that the momentum has built in the fire department. So I become acclimated, and I see a purpose, and that purpose is to provide the community with what they deserve.
Carl?
John, we've known each other for a long time, and you used your 15 minutes wisely that you would get before the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court.
All off the cuff, Carl.
Very well, John, and thank you. When we look at your job skills, abilities, and knowledge, I'm looking at an application. We have had two people that were recommended by the committee. One of them has withdrawn his application, so we're left with David Hevner. Why you over David? He is the chief of Livonia, manages 5 firehouses, close to 200 people, as I understand it, and has implemented programs for a community that is much larger than Groseal. So he has experience that you don't have, but you have experience locally that he doesn't have. I'm not throwing a softball question, but looking at his resume and looking at yours, There's some similarities and there's some differences. Why you as opposed to David?
Well, first of all, that candidate hasn't been in a firehouse in over a year. He's retired. Okay? He has a defined benefit pension, and he's not so reliant on Groseal as an income. So that's one thing I noticed. He hasn't been in a firehouse in over a year. Second thing is, what he indicated was he started in Livonia as a firefighter. He was hired in-house. He has not come to any other station, any other department, and practiced EMS or firefighting. Matter of fact, I like the question him asking him when was the last time he's been in the ambulance to provide EMS. I'm sure he hasn't assisted in providing albuterol in the last few years. I'm sure he hasn't given chest compressions in the last few years. And I'm sure he hasn't probably given an assessment report to a doctor in the last few years. He works and worked under let's say, a department with very regimented roles. He had a lot of officers that he could rely on to give direction to, battalion chiefs, captains, lieutenants, and sergeants. He had a lot of firefighters coming in on dedicated shifts who were reliant on that fire department to make an income. My position is he's not even a good candidate for the Groseal Fire Department. Why? Because of the things I just mentioned. His skill set in providing EMS must be questioned. His geographical awareness must be questioned. Let me say this. I've been down to Lighthouse Point. And of course, you snake in there. There are some very large residences. I've been specifically trained on that parcel of roadway. He is not anywhere aware of the specific geographies. It is a nightmare to get a fire truck down Lighthouse Point when the hydrant is way back behind you on Groseal Parkway. Give you another example. The nearest fire hydrant from the corner of South Point and Boucher, all the way down Boucher, all the way down Chatham, is on the corner of Chatham and Wilbur. That's got to be 1,000 yards. So, just because he comes from a larger department that he was embedded in, and he has a larger department with multiple employees, does not indicate to me that smaller is easier. A volunteer fire department is a much harder task than managing a career department with multiple officers under you who rely on you as income and promotion. Here you have to get into your intangible back pocket and pull out these skills and find a way to motivate, educate, instruct, and respect. If you don't have those intangible skills, which are very difficult to garnish, you will fail in this department. It's not the certificates on the wall that determine success at the Groseal Fire Department. It's listen to people so that they want to talk to you, and talk to people so that they want to listen to you. I'll answer the question in a different way too. people leave Grosio Fire Department. People leave an organization not because of the organization. They leave an organization because of the manager. And that's a little bit of what I mean. This is a much more fluid environment. Carl, in my opinion, having a union that the firefighters are in is an easier job to manage discipline than a volunteer fire department that doesn't have a union. Because as you know, bargaining contracts have a very specific, regimented, increasing level of discipline. And that is a roadmap that a chief can rely on. This chief has got his or her upbringing, education, and their spouse. And that's it. Thank you, Carl. I could write volumes, but it's a tough job that I don't think a career chief has any idea. And again, I question his EMS calls and what he's been doing. And by the way, I heard the interview. I'm not coming out only on high-profile emergencies, which was what was stated. Every citizen is a high-profile case, period. And so if you're going to answer that question when you're going through an interview, I'm coming out on high-profile cases, go for it.
Quick follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
When we look at high-profile cases, the last statistics I saw, we don't have them broken down into high-profile, good, bad, ugly, missing people, and help somebody get back in their wheelchair or get back in bed. The statistics that I'm aware with show that 800 calls a year. I don't expect this chief, interim chief, or a chief from outside or any other chief from inside to make 800 calls a year. And I know you're not telling me you're going to come to every call, but how do you sort out, John, so that she doesn't become a widow and lonely and upset, and you have to make a phone call to me or somebody else saying, hey, I going over the edge. How do you determine which of those calls you're going to go on? Because like that chief from Livonia, you have a lot of trained people that come in there. He doesn't have to necessarily know it's 1,000 yards, 3,000 feet to that fire department because he has a lot of people trained, a lot of people that are here.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do you determine which of those calls you go on?
I wrote an email to Officer Brozak this morning, and I said, this is what I want the dispatchers to vet on the calls. I'd like to know chief complaint. I'd like to know if there are any bleeds. I'd like to know the age, if there consciousness, is there CPR in progress, and any scene threats. I wrote a couple more criterion, and I sent that to Lieutenant Brozak. He's in charge of the dispatchers. The reason for that is so that I can hear the calls go off and I can filter. If this is a very serious case where I need to show up on scene, there could be a matter where a firefighter was injured or some serious injuries. So that email was specifically generated so that I could filter the calls. However, prior two chiefs to me were making 80% of the calls. That did not allow for the independent skill set of the firefighters to improve themselves. When the chief is coming on the calls, you're a large figure, you're shadowing over them. So I deliberately peeled back on the calls that I was making before I was the chief. I was making 50% plus, and now my calls are deliberately pulled back to about 44% at night. Now, mind you, at night we'll get about, 12 or 14 calls a month, Kevin? So when you see that, I'm making maybe 4, 5. Last month I made 4. So in the other way, Carl, that I determine whether I should go on a call, when the firefighters hear the tone, they have an app on their phones. It's I am responding. They hear the tone, they open the app, and they hit an icon that says, I am coming to the station or I'm coming to the scene. That is showing up on my personal phone call. So I can see at home how many of the firefighters or the EMTs are going and where they're going. Then I don't go on the call. So I use that as a tool. We have a locator on our phones to help me realize how many firefighter EMTs are going on the call. If I see enough, which is very frequent, I don't go on the call. So this technological tool that maps the firefighters where they're going is a major asset to the chief. So that's my answer to your question. I hope you understand.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kurt?
Please describe any familiarity you might have with the township of Grosse Ile. And you've already answered these primarily, but I do have a specific question. Do you know, obviously you know each and every one of the firefighters, you know their wives and children, do you not?
I do know their wives. Some I know better than others, of course. I know their children. We have firefighters. We have one firefighter with 4 girls, another one with 3 girls, another one with boys, and, I do. So surely I do.
Is there any other familiarity that you would bring to this position that, say, another candidate wouldn't? The question I just asked, I think, is instructive because the fire department is more than just the volunteers. It's the wives and the children as well.
Well, the fire department historically has been familial, okay?
Generational, too.
Generational. One of my mentors, Kim Richardson, his father, his grandfather, they were on the fire department. Before I was on the fire department, I did know for sure many firefighters had their grandparents, their fathers on the fire department. So I think I answered your question. But, let me back up another point. You talk about Grosse Ile. And, you look at Nancy's Boulevard. Nancy's Boulevard is becoming a magnet for senior citizens. A lot of those condos are full with senior citizens. I am precisely aware that when you come down Nancy's Boulevard, you have a lot of long driveways getting behind those condos, right? I'll call them veins coming off Nancy's Boulevard. Some of them veins are maybe a couple 100 yards long. There's not one hydrant back there on all 6 of them. Not one hydrant. We had a specific training to walk that site and pre-plan what are we going to do, because it's a situation, your first goal is saving lives, right? Well, those buildings there'll be a lot of senior citizens in those condos, and you have to be aware that your hydrants are out by the road behind you, and that driveway is a couple 100 yards long. So there are challenges, and you have to know those to the specifics of Grosse Ile. And sure, I don't believe in drive-by instruction. You got to get out of your trucks and spend an hour or 2 back there. So.
Thank you.
So just continuing on with the list, you've already answered some of these questions, but Grosse Ile, obviously, we have islands. Tell us a little bit about the challenges that you're confronted with the geographical makeup of 14 islands and bridges, some that are up, some that don't seem like they'll ever be repaired. How do you address that?
Well, there are 12 islands in Grosse Ile. Now, Groseal's master plan says, we will provide fire and service to residences. And then the very next sentence says, pretty much, as long as they're roadways. Well, some of those roadways have bridges. I had a discussion with John Keim. I know Swan Island Bridge is scheduled to be replaced. Swan Island Bridge, from my understanding, is going to be dismantled where you won't be able to use half the bridge to get back and forth, and that there will be a temporary bridge, okay, placed right next to it. Well, we have to be very keen on whether we're going to be able to get a ladder truck over that temporary bridge. Okay? So I know when we had meetings specifically about the bridges going to down East River by, Albemarle Boat Club going on to Hickory. At one time, I think that bridge was in such decayed state that we were really considering whether we could get the ladder truck over that bridge and to make sure when you went over the bridge, you were doing 5 miles an hour. If you went on a call and you were doing 25 or 35, you should have a life jacket on. And then that happens. Some of the bridges are, we got the bridge on Groseal Park Lane down at just north of Horsemill. Well, when the tone goes off, you better know what address is south of that bridge and what address is north of that bridge. So much I have it in my phone. Because you don't want to go Horsemill to Groseal Park Lane and then find out you're on the wrong side of that bridge. Okay, so now we have the outer islands that we have taken on some EMS roles. The waterways around Groseal can be treacherous. I've been on those waterways since I've been 6 years old. West River is completely different than East River in its depth. South of Sauron, the dikes are there now, but before the dikes, you had to be out about 3/4 of a mile or you're going to hit some ground. North of Sugar, south of Sugar, there's structure, there's rocks. South of Calf is very shallow. You go along East River Road, across from Calf, you go up East River close to the shoreline, you're going to hit bottom. We all know the bridge was going over from Groseal Parkway to Stony. Well, I remember as a kid when the structure was sticking out of the water, we would swim to it back in our younger days, but that's still there. Out by the Red Buoy south of Sugar Island, right there's a rock the size of a Volkswagen, and if you don't know it's there, goodbye. So you got the rocks north of near Hennepin Point. You don't come close to that at all. I've been on all these islands. I've been on rescues. At night, let's face it, they're partying on those islands. Okay? I've been on calls where the scene can become unsafe. You have to be aware that those islands are used for summertime partying. The chief has to be aware. And we just had a meeting on this yesterday. I want everybody who's on that boat, when they get off that boat, I do not want them wearing their lay clothes. It better say Groseal Fire Department right across the front so you can identify yourself and garnish some awareness from the individuals on those waters. So, Kurt, I can go on and on. The fan boat is a very, very expensive and particular piece of equipment. You have to train significantly. I have. Matter of fact, with a former firefighter, I even adjusted the blades to get the correct pitch. Bolted them down. I've even repaired the blades from damage. it can go on and on out there in the water. Water is a very dangerous place. So,
Thank you. Jerry?
You've been interim chief now for several months, and I assume you've had a chance to work with or meet with our elected officials. Many of them are here tonight. What have been some of your positive interactions, and if you dare, some of your more challenging ones?
well,
Please don't mention any names.
no. Look, the board has their responsibilities. I respect that. I can tell you a recent interaction with the board. In August of last year, I realized that the Grosio firefighters and EMTs going on scene are completely detached from the mother station, okay? They have no communication except for the officers, the chiefs, lieutenants, and captains. We're asking these people to come out of their homes and go to a residence. Unfortunately, we're armed to the teeth in this society. One of our EMTs showed up on a scene where there was a gunshot wound, and he didn't have a radio. So I went to the chief, I went to the members, and I said, I'm drafting a proposal to the commission that every EMT have a radio. Without a radio, you can't transfer EMS requests for equipment. Do we have a person having trouble breathing? I need oxygen. I need a non-rebreather. Bring it to me. Okay, so it's scene safety, medical attention, a radio is significant. I drafted the proposal to the chief. I took over as chief. I went to the commission. Uta was on that commission, and she understood exactly what I was interested in. She was very instrumental in considering the purchase of the radios a single source, even though I had other bids. She considered the purchase of the radios an emergency situation. In that chair, Uta said, we're buying the radios. John, I don't even know if you have to put this on the agenda. She was essential. I met with Supervisor Budney a week later. I explained to him in the conference room downstairs. He understood. He said to me, we'll put it on the consent agenda. That was a wonderful experience I had with the board. Another challenging experience. Okay, pandemic relief money, right? COVID relief money. COVID relief money came in July. There was $500,000 provided to the township. Okay, I was made aware of that. And I'm very aware that my opinion, right? The primary purpose of the COVID relief money was to assist firefighters and police. That was my opinion. I met with Derek at first to discuss COVID relief money coming to the fire department. Derek explained to me that a good portion of that money was being allocated to the wastewater treatment plant. I respectfully disagreed with channeling that money there when a lot of our firefighters contracted COVID. In preparation with meeting Derek, I personally read 400 pages of the Pandemic Relief Act. These are the original tabs that I had in preparation to advocate for money coming to the fire department. The money I thought should be spent more on financial relief to the firefighters. In the end, it all worked out. I know we got the grant for the wastewater treatment plant. Thank you, federal government. And in the end, just recently, more COVID money was allocated via the board to public safety. So, but before that, it was challenging. I was personally dealing with a situation where I thought the intent of the act was primarily to firefighters and police, and I advocated strongly, strong enough to read this whole act, and I met with Derek for about 2 or 3 hours. It did get heated, right? I think there were a couple firefighters in that room with me, and I don't think they said a word, because they just let me kind of take over. But a year and a half later, it worked out. We got the money coming to the DPS because we got some relief from the federal government. So that was another challenging. Prior administration, I took the podium for health insurance for the firefighters. At that time, there were some significant changes occurring in the legislature in Lansing, and the hard cap came up. The hard cap was a China wall to the firefighters' compensation, because their compensation is based on insurance. The hard cap basically put a hurdle in front of the township for paying for 100% of the firefighters' insurance. Even if the township was gracious enough to do it, they were faced with a legislative act that they couldn't. The firefighters maybe didn't understand the conflict there that was legit on both sides, but I advocated for the firefighters. But I always believe there's a solution, okay? Good people, calm, can solve anything. That was a challenge, and through working it with the administration at the time, we did come up with a way to compensate the firefighters for the little addition that was going to come out of their pocket that the hard cap was forcing on the firefighters, and we came up with some allowances. So there are 3 examples. And also I've dealt with discipline issues that I interfaced with the board and so forth and so on. So those are very, very relevant issues that the chief here has to understand in dealing with the compensation of the firefighters, motivating them and keeping them thinking that Mother Earth appreciates and understands, but they also have to perform. They also have a duty. So there you go.
Else.
You spoke before. You spoke before about your involvement with the volunteer fire department, and you mentioned the difference between a career and a full-time department and volunteer. So, with that in mind, what methods are you going to use to recruit and retain membership within the department to ensure staffing levels that are adequate to service the township's annual call volume?
In the entire state of Michigan, if not nationally, fire departments are under a lot of strain. Departments right off the island here were staffing firehouses with 5 firefighters during the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. I'm proud to say that Groesville could, at the same time, staff their firehouse with 20 members. We have a labor shortage in the country, so we have to get creative. On July 29th, we're having an EMS employment open house. We're going to be there between 10 and 2 on July 29th. This is just for EMTs and firefighters. It's not the open house that we have in October. We're going to open up the doors. We're going to explain to them where they could get their education locally. We're going to explain to them that we will pay for the tuition. We'll explain to them the duties, and we'll explain to them the benefits. Okay? So that's never been done before. July 29th. And whoever is listening and watching tonight, if you have a granddaughter, a grandson, a husband, a wife, put that date in your calendar and come down to the fire department July 29th. Your fire department is in need, as is every fire department. And I guarantee you it will be beneficial. So there's one strategy. I actually plan to use this time to recruit, if we can. So the open house, I know we've been very active in social media. There are at least 4 sites that continuously have an advertisement to come on the fire department. We are aggressive at word of mouth. I did call Wayne County Community College. They have an EMS program. Gave 2 phone calls to administrators to see if I could go there and meet their EMTs and ask them if they're interested in coming to the fire department. So I wanted to go to the students directly at the college, and I'm preparing for that. It's a slow process because they don't have any classes right now. So that has been primarily our plan, but word of mouth helps. Word of mouth helps. Younger kids, 18, 19, it's a tough chore to expect them to stay here for another 2-3 years. I mean, they're very, and they should be, unstable in what their plans are. So that's our strategy. Yeah. And we come up with more. Matter of fact, we just had a committee meeting two weeks ago for an hour and a half after 5 o'clock in the kitchen to discuss recruitment, and we did we had plenty of ideas, and I think they're all good ideas. So this situation has been a little of a distraction, fine, and I was going to, when it's over, I will sit down with Derek and tell him what I came up with, because it's going to require a little bit more financial resources that we have, but I don't want the board not to be aware of it, and I want to get their approval. Okay?
Carl.
John, one of the generic questions that were asked of the 6 people that interviewed for the position was, as chief, do you feel part of your job as a mentor and succession planner, provide examples where you have fostered leadership roles within the staff and have initiated succession planning? I want to tailor that to your specific situation. When we've had a fire chief that was here for a very long time, Ken Fisher, was succeeded by Duncan for a very long time. They used to refer to Frank Kelly as the Attorney General, Eternal General. And I look at that and I see 4 names within the department. And again, I've only been on the commission for a couple of weeks. But I see John Camilleri as the chief, and I see 3 other people that are the other 3 legs to that 4-legged stool. Kevin and Chris and Tim. Now, the law of averages dictates that within the next 5 years, with their age and experience, that 1 or 2 of those legs are going to leave. I'm not comfortable with a 2-legged chair. I want to know what you're going to do so that if Kevin or Tim or Chris or John leave, how do we have confidence that we have a succession plan in place that will service the 10,700 people on this island?
A few things that I have done with the younger, the 20-year-olds. These are 20-year-olds. I have handed to them the respect that having equipment in their hands requires, apart from other people. So I've challenged them with the use of specialized equipment that I don't let other people have. And I explained that to them, that I'm not just letting you do this because it's a good day. I challenge them, and I tell them why I'm letting them use the specialized equipment. The specialized equipment just recently, I took 3 $5,000 radios. And I said, I'm going to allow these 3 EMTs to take radios home and entrust them with the possession and use of those radios that I didn't let other EMTs. Surely they showed responsibility. Surely they have shown the skill set, the numbers on calls, and the expertise in their EMS skills. Another individual, in January, I said, are you interested in going to EMS instructor classes? He said, definitely. He actually asked me. And I said, this was one of the 3 that I've given a radio to. So I've seen progression. He started classes in January. The fire department is paying the tuition, and he's still going to EMS instructor class. So I identified the 20 and 30-year-olds who show an interest in advancing through EMS and fire, and I place in their hands and direct to them increased responsibilities to determine whether they have the desire to increase their rank through the fire department and eventually make it to the fire to a chief or other high rank. So I identify and bring people through by putting them in charge with more sophisticated equipment and providing them with educational instruction, and making it available to them. So, and of course, mentoring and showing them through the chiefs and the other officers, this is how you act. This is what you do on an EMS call. So part of mentoring is showing them how you perform on a call that you expect them to follow procedure. You got to make calls as a leader.
The higher you rise within the department, Kevin is not doing the same thing that a firefighter with 2 years of service in the department does. Tim doesn't do just the work that an officer has with maybe 5 years of experience. I understand you've identified the younger people, the people that are moving up. What do you do to replace somebody like yourself or Tim or Chris or Kevin now within the next 10 years as opposed to giving a 25-year-old a $5,000 radio and some of the training you're talking about?
Well, the 3 individuals I mentioned range from 25 to 35. So it's not heavy down to 25. It's in that range. Kevin is not 56 like I am. He's in his younger 40s. So yeah, he's prematurely going gray, or maybe not. So Kevin is at an age, where he's not nearly at the age of myself or Tim. Chris is 4 years younger than I am. And we have some other 40-year-olds that I have. Chad Miller, who's a captain. He's in his 40s, and as a captain, just as my resume indicated, he's charged with more responsibilities, and, you know, not to exclude Chad, he is a good candidate too. So I would put Chad Miller in that profile too. And of course, you know, there are others that I won't mention their names on live here that do fit into that age group that are also officers. You know, I know one of our officers, well, strike that. I know one of our firefighters who's in that age group is going to train tomorrow at Fermi. So, you know, he called me this afternoon and, can I have that instruction? I said, sure, go get the instruction. So we're always training to increase, you know, our, let's say, our future personnel and getting them up to par. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you've answered some of this, but what do you see as the future trends in the services a fire department provides? What changes do you see in how fire departments operate to address these trends?
Well, one trend that we have in our population and is significantly noted on Grosse Ile is the number of people over 55. The majority of Grosse Ile residents are over 55. And we're going to have more and more seniors. Seniors require the firefighter EMT to have some specialized skills. When you go on scene and you have a senior, as they get older, you have to become more aware that that senior may become frightened that they might lose their independence because of this EMS call. Seniors don't necessarily want the fire department to come in and take them to the hospital. I've seen multiple calls where seniors are afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid they're going to lose their independence. That is going to be an increasing charged responsibility of the EMT to communicate softly with the senior to bring their anxiety level down. Let's face it, if you're dealing with a senior, is there some end-of-life anxiety here? They're afraid to lose their independence. So the firefighter EMT on Grosse Ile, with that many calls with seniors, has to be an excellent communicator. So that is a significant trend on Grosse Ile, providing EMS to seniors. But, however, Grosse Ile is surrounded by a number of industrial sites. More 20 years ago than today, but we do have some very, very specific industrial sites that can be cataclysmic to Grosse Ile. For example, Jones Chemical. Nobody really realizes it, but right down the street, right at the end of the toll bridge, right by, I won't name the establishment, right? There's a bar, restaurant, whatever you want to call it right there. Then there's a little side driveway. And if you look down that driveway, you see Jones Chemical. They have enough gas in that building to wipe out entire Grosse Ile. That building is, I don't know, 2,000 square feet, built in the 40s, looks like cinder block. You can see the tankers, the gas tankers sitting right next to that building. Well, let me tell you this. That is a situation where, with the staffing and budgetary problems that all the fire departments are having, mutual aid is going to be essential. Okay? We have, Solutia. Surely they're downsizing their operations, but we got Detroit Edison. They're now natural gas fired. Okay? So these industrial sites are going to allow, or I should say require, mutual aid assistance should there be a an incident, okay? I can proudly say that the Grosville Fire Department actually had an in-house training at Jones Chemical. We were in the building. We came to realize how those gas containers are transported. They're on trucks, they're on rail cars. And so we have some knowledge about what could seriously injure the entire north side of Grosville or kill them. I mean, I hate to say it, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's real. You ask the question, I'll answer it. So there are some trends there, mutual aid, and the senior citizens that we have on this island that require some specialized awareness and skills.
John, we have a great fire association. It's longstanding. What's the role the chief plays with the fire association from your perspective?
No doubt they're mutually exclusive. Okay, look, the fire department is a branch of township government. That building, that administration, which includes me and Kevin, are exclusive from the association. Your roles and your obligations, your fiduciary duty is exclusive. I take that very seriously. However, the association is an essential part, if you have the right person in the helm, to convey messages to the public that are important. For example, we just had a millage passed, right? That was overwhelmingly passed by the public. The public spoke and they said, we want to give the priority more money to the fire department to do their skill set and exist. They spoke. That message, a lot of that message, okay, was provided through the association members. The association was essential in helping the township citizens because they spoke, and it was important to the fire department, which is what I call the platinum asset of Grosville Township, right? So there's a prime example. So the association can be a tool of the fire department. That's how I look at it. Now, they also know that the chief has a fiduciary duty to the board, right? The board is the chief's employer. Everything is about relationships. And one does not abuse the other. And surely the association will not abuse me. That's just how it is. I've been around long enough. It's just out of respect to them. They're wonderful, but they're not going to abuse the chief. This chief.
Sure.
Okay.
Speaking of relationships, as the chief, you're going to be interacting with people other than township officials or the fire department, and this is sort of a two-part question. We're part of mutual aid, and the first question is, how do you see yourself interacting with mutual aid? And the second part of the question is our interactions with the community, your community relationships.
Well, recently I was on a mutual aid call. I was at the fire across from the old Firestone building, okay? And I was out on that scene probably about 4 hours. I shook a lot of hands with firefighters, chiefs, assistant chiefs, and had pizza with them out there, while at the same time instructing our people, radioing in for additional manpower. So that was recent. And so my relationship with other chiefs and other firefighters off Grosville is developing. Of course, I've just been in this position for about 6 months, but Chief Bruce Vick of Trenton was in my office about 5 years ago. not on a legal matter. We were just talking. And he's now the chief of Trenton. So I saw him at a chiefs meeting about a month ago, and he goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "How are you doing?" He goes, "Yeah, you know," so I had a prior relationship, albeit short and sweet. You know, Chief Miles of Woodhaven. Well, we got the deputy chief of Woodhaven right behind me on the fire department. He had kind of, let's say, gave me an initial kind of orientation with Chief Miles. So everything's about relationships. It's those, again, those intangible skills that you have to relate to other chiefs and understand, you know. And I'll tell you right now, the other fire I was on at 2:30 in the morning, I called mutual aid in from Trenton. It was one of the first things I did. Yeah. So.
Yes, the second part of that question was community relations.
Oh, well, community relations. Well, community relations on Groseal with the fire department are deep. We respect our dedicated millages. Okay, we really do. I've heard about it from the day I got on the fire department that every call is a voter. Every call gives you an opportunity to meet the people who fund you. And I take that very seriously, just like, you know, most important is the service you provide right now. Because remember, 98% of our calls are ambulances pulling in someone's driveway. They're not high profile. They are someone's grandmother, someone's grandfather, someone's father, someone's daughter, someone's son. I can't tell you how many calls I go on where somebody says, "Hey, are you so-and-so?" to other firefighters, or even to me. So I'll tell you, Jerry, when it comes to community relations, you use what you have at your disposal, and the very first important community relation is that call. Right now. The whole family's watching. And our firefighters better be professional and courteous, or that's how I was brought on the fire department. That's your opportunity. Now, we got the good fellows, too. The Groseal firefighters, good fellows, boy, they've done everything from building handicap ramps to people's homes to putting in plumbing to houses that don't have plumbing. We provide gift cards, gas cards, pay utility bills to people in financial need, clothing. I've seen firefighters drop off food baskets at people's front porches at 4 o'clock in the morning. They don't even leave a note, you know, in the snow. So Groseal is grassroots, and your fire department knows how to communicate with the public. We don't have all these bling-bling organizations, okay? Because I don't have the staff to get all these bling-bling organizations. But these ladies and gentlemen know the relationship they have to forge. So that Goodfellows, that Groseal Association, I did go down to the hangar and I kind of sold some raffle tickets with the association. Okay, I think I met 300 citizens. I had to get out of there because it was a competition between me and another firefighter who sold the most raffles, and I think I was losing, so I left. So, Jerry, it's all grassroots. Association, Goodfellows, and the calls we make.
Rumor has it Kovich destroyed you in selling raffle tickets. That's what I heard.
Kovich?
Yeah.
No, it was Bob Roscoe who I was going head-to-head with.
All right.
They
Dallas.
were all there. They're, you know.
I heard you came in like fourth. But
No,
Dallas.
fifth.
Dallas.
You talked about discipline in your, recently, and wondered what the procedures you would use in the volunteer fire department, and how would you, would each employee be treated the same when it comes to discipline, or do you Will there be exceptions to the rules based upon the circumstances?
Well, first I'll start with my role in discipline. Here's a termination letter I wrote to one of our firefighters 2 years ago. Here is another record of discipline that I wrote because I was front and center on the discipline. Recently, I had to deal with an individual that I had to have him on leave to investigate and consider a matter. I don't know if there's this misnomer that an individual from the fire department cannot deal with the personnel straight up and discipline them or not. That may have been the case with somebody else, but that's not the case with me, okay? So my record is strong and hard about disciplining and demanding professionalism and keeping the record clear and concise. Now, in the fire department, we do have a disciplinary policy in our SOGs. This is our SOGs. Every individual is afforded, and I'll use the words that are right out of the SOG, due process. It says it right there. Due process is given to a firefighter EMT to make sure things are fair, that things are equal, that things are impartial, and that pause and contemplation has occurred to slow down the process. Okay? One of the main characteristics that a chief has to have is non-judgment. Non-judgment in everything. I like to say, okay, so our SOGs say anybody could bring an allegation to the chief. You have 24 hours. It must be in writing. This is if it's not the chief's. If you don't bring the allegation in 24 hours, the chief has the discretion to dismiss the discipline. However, if the chief has the allegation in 24 hours, the chief can act, and he has or she has a litany of actions they can take. They're all written in the SOG. The firefighter has the right to a disciplinary appeal. During the appeal, he's entitled to due process, the right to submit documents, the right to bring witnesses, the right to submit audio, video, exculpatory evidence, whatever they want. The appeal board is consistent of 3 highest ranking officers and 2 firefighters. Okay? When it comes to discipline, everything must be equal. Everything must be investigated slowly. Individuals may tell the chief that it was this way, and the chief should have the awareness that their perception could be completely wrong, and the truth is somewhere out there, and it's the chief's duty to go find it and not rely so much on hearsay, and should rid the environment of any unfair practices. And so that's our disciplinary policy, and it should be equal across the board blindly, okay, to all members of the fire department. Okay?
John, from the standpoint of what makes a good, effective leader, manager, chief, and, from the standpoint of how do you facilitate good communication?
Well, if you're asking me what are the qualities of a good, effective chief, one is, again, equality. Treat everybody equally. Again, remember what I said, members don't leave the fire department because of the organization. They leave the fire department because of the manager. And a good manager has to ensure equality so there's a sense of fairness. That's one very important quality. The other important quality of a chief is preparation. You have to prepare and prepare and prepare so that you can instruct, so that you can convey your communication correctly and truthfully. So good communication skills. Another good quality to motivate people is I like to live by example. That's how I was raised. If I ask firefighters and EMTs to do something, I got to make sure I do it. I can do it too. Of course, I'm getting older, so I can't swing an axe like I used to. But I can surely say, when I was a sergeant, I did. So you have to live by example to a significant point, and you always got to be truthful and honest. These firefighters live in Grosse Ile. They may know more than you about a subject matter that you're talking about, and the very last thing you want to lose as a chief is credibility. One of the last criteria I like to say that a chief has to have is optimism. Optimism is like a smile. It's contagious. And if you're optimistic because you're prepared, because you're honest, because you're truthful, to be a leader, you have to be honest. You have to be optimistic. All great leaders through history said, we're going to do this. Well, and they said, we'll be okay. We'll get there. We're going to do this. We will accomplish our goals through history. What is today? Yesterday, D-Day, anniversary. When Ike said, we're going in, he didn't think he was going to lose all those people. He said, we'll be okay. We're liberating Europe, right? And everyone followed him. He was optimistic, and he was prepared. So that's your Grosse Ile chief.
John, the next question that we have on our list is, and I'm a little embarrassed to ask this, but how would you rate yourself on your verbal and written communication? And what skills do you use to encourage, facilitate communication? And John, I'm going to give you a pass on the verbal, okay? You've indicated a moment ago that you have an app on the phone that allows you to monitor.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that when you and I first started out, we had pagers.
Yeah.
Kurt had cell phones. We had pagers.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. That's true. I remember when Kurt had one that was like a walkie-talkie. I look at where we are now with all the advancements in the technology. So when we talk about communication, obviously you speak well. I'm assuming you write very, very well, although I haven't seen any of your briefs lately. No. What I would like to know is how you're going to move to further us in the 21st century with communication.
Communication is essential. It's part of providing high-quality EMS. I mentioned earlier, I saw this very large void that was much necessary to get all the EMTs radios. The radios, yes, are for scene safety, but just as equally as important, the individuals coming. When there's a call, if the call is on the south end, everybody, EMT firefighter who lives south of Macomb, goes to the scene, and the firefighter EMT north of Macomb goes to the station, picks up the ambulance, and meets the EMT firefighters on the south end. The communication is important to the firefighters coming with the sophisticated equipment in the ambulance to know, is this a troubled breathing, difficulty breathing, or is this a CPR call? Is this a call that is a bleed? Do we need bandages, or do we need to get the Lucas out? Minutes is heart muscle. Time is heart muscle. If the firefighters, and I do this all the time because I'm in the rig, if I hear that this is a trouble breathing case, I know to grab the bag that has the essential breathing equipment. An OPA, right? Or a CompuTube, a King Airway, breathing airway. If I know this is a CPR in progress, my mind is already clicking down the HEMS protocols. I'm clicking down, I got to have that bag. I don't need that one. I need that one. Oh, the Lucas is on that side door of the ambulance. You don't want to run around the ambulance, go, where's the Lucas? So the radios are essential to provide proper EMS so that the incoming firefighter EMTs with the sophisticated medical equipment are prepared the second that rig stops. So we have the radios for all the EMTs. Now, because of the labor shortage or the supply line shortage, we ordered those radios in April, right, Uta? They're not here yet. This is June. So that's why I took it upon myself to go, what EMT firefighters am I trying to mentor? I had some radios, and I said, I'm going to put you in charge of this more sophisticated equipment. I'm going to give you these radios and see how you perform. You are being held to a higher standard to bring you through the responsibility levels of the fire department so that in the future you're more prepared. So that's one
Kurt, can
answer
I
your
ask a
question.
follow-up question real quickly? John, you mentioned about an hour ago that there was a gunshot wound
Yeah.
that you attended. We have well over 4,500 residences on Grosse Ile.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are populated with people who have mental health issues. And to me, a gunshot wound suggests that there was an extreme level of violence. You've talked about communication. When there is a call to dispatch to a home that may present an unusual risk of some kind, how does your department, I'm not asking for specifics, but how does your department interface with the police department to provide security so that the first responders and the officers, police officers as well, are not at risk? I'm very concerned about that.
Well, I just texted somebody 2 days ago, and I described the police department as the third hand of the fire department. I've had police officers grab my air pack out of a snow pile, let's say, because I got it off real quick. I was very exhausted, and a police officer was right there to put another air bottle on my pack so I could go into the fire. I was much younger. So to describe the police department, they are the third hand of the fire department. So I want to compliment them. Now, when it comes to scene safety, the police officers, I think, hold it upon themselves to provide a safe scene to the firefighters. They have an excellent, they are the one hand and the other, okay? So they charge themselves with the responsibility to provide us with a safe scene. However, some of the properties on Grosse Ile are very large. To go undetected. I've been in a house where there was a police officer with me, and unfortunately, this gentleman stood up, and I thought I was dealing with Joe Probert, and it was a situation that he did grab me, and thank God it was only one flight of stairs, and. But there were police officers there, and let's face it, it's just a situation that you have to be careful. And I didn't have a radio, because I think, on a department 1 year. So, it can be, even though they provide an excellent service to us, second to none, there are situations. And the gunshot wound, that was a high caliber, military style weapon. And that's when I became very concerned. We just went on a call 10 days ago. I think that gentleman is still in the hospital in a coma. And that was a criminal act. So, perpetrated by one individual, but when you get on the scene, you really don't know that. That's afterwards. So yeah, we do have situations on Grosse Ile where scene safety is an issue. And matter of fact, I think that perpetrator is being charged with assault with intent to commit murder. Yeah, and your EMTs are on scene. And I know the first EMT didn't have a radio. And I'm nervous and I'm nervy about getting those radios to people. And it's not anyone's fault. We're just dealing with a supply chain problem. But the radios are here, but they're in the hands of the state of Michigan, getting their licenses and frequencies and all that. So they're getting here.
I'm good, thank you, Kurt.
John, I'm going to read the next two questions and refrain from comment because I think you've already answered them, and then I'll follow up with the third one that I think would be helpful. The first question here is, what do you view as important characteristics of being an effective chief, leader, manager? Next question, do you feel that the chief should handle runs in a similar frequency as the rest in the department? Those are two that I think you've pretty well answered, so hold your comment on that. And then the next question, and this is one where I think you can provide some insight. During an average workday, how do you determine your priorities for the day, week, and month?
Okay. For the day, my
But
priority.
before you start, do you have any brief add to the first two, or have we covered that? I think we've covered that.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Continue.
Okay, as to my priorities, as to the day, I first have to address what happened last night. Okay, so if there was a call and there was a matter that the chief has to get intimately involved in, then that's my priority number one right there. We just had Island Fest, and my first discussion in my office was something that happened at Island Fest. Okay. It wasn't criminal-like. It was more clear a procedure matter with the fire department. So that's my priority. What happened that night? I have to clear those issues up. The second thing I have to do is turn on the coffee. That's the chief's job too. So, and then the third thing I have to do is look at my emails and make sure the board is not communicating with me and they want me to address something with them. So that's a priority. Interface with the board, communicate with the board, and look at my emails. The fourth thing I have to do is make sure that the equipment is not void of responding to a call right now. So if there's an equipment matter, I have to get out there, interface with Kevin primarily, and get this equipment in ready working order. So those are my priorities, and that's kind of my go-to sequence of events that I have to take care of. So, and when I say the night before, there might be a piece of equipment that needs repair. That's the priority right there, is that equipment. So, yeah.
Thank you.
John, you've already addressed this as well, but budgetary issues, knowledge of the budget, interfacing with the finance department, township board, expenditures, revenue, millages, things like that. You have a good grasp of all those components?
I do.
All right.
I'm familiar, very,
Okay.
yeah.
Jerry?
This is another series of questions on interpersonal interactions. Have you ever had any problems dealing with someone and people giving you a hard time? That includes not only people in the fire department, but your clients. And, if we had to round up a bunch of people, what would they say about you, and how do you handle these things?
Well, I never had any problems with anybody. I like to say, I've never had a problem with an individual, except for maybe someone that I mentioned was disciplined, okay? And it's not a personal problem. It's, if you're going to use a vague term, problem, well, if you don't act professional, I got a problem. But on a personal level, I never wish anyone to get ill. I don't ever wish someone to have family or marital problems or financial problems. So I'll cover that clearly. That is removed from my mindset. So I don't have a problem with anybody on the fire department. I teach them that, I kind of figure we all should be blessed that today we're somewhat happy, and that we can find a meeting of the minds on a lot of things. So, Jerry, did that answer your question? Okay.
Dallas?
If we recall some of your previous employers, what would they have to say about you? And assuming you are familiar with the duties of your job, are you able to perform the tasks in the job with or without reasonable accommodation?
Well, my employer, okay, someone who judges me, my wife, okay? And look, I've known my wife since I've been 14. Yes, Nicole Rainville, and yes, that's Pierre's sister. So my wife would probably tell you that the chief's job never ends. Never ends. And it's not just going on calls. No, it's if you're going to motivate, and you're always having your finger on those intangible skills and keeping them showing up for calls. Like the chief, because we don't have a staff at the department. We don't have battalion chiefs. We don't have captains, lieutenants. You're going to have to field some text messages, some phone calls. I'm sure these trustees and these supervisors do at night too. It's just nature of the job. So my wife would probably tell you he spends a significant amount of his time chiefing. And that's, an issue. And, we all know the prior chiefs made a lot of calls. I'm not doing that. I'll make a good amount of calls, but 80% of the calls, that's mismanaging something. That's not developing your staff, my opinion. I'll make excuses for myself. They may disagree. I respectfully would like to hear their opinion one day.
Carl?
Quick question of Mrs. Camilleri, and I apologize for not recognizing you immediately when you came in. It's been a number of years. John says he gets along with everybody, including the neighborhood. Does that include Ken?
His neighbor.
Is that his neighbor that he gets along well with?
One of his favorite brothers.
One of his two favorite, probably.
Yeah, there you go, Carl.
Boys.
John, the question is, being an internal candidate, how do you feel about managing and potentially having to discipline employees you may consider your friends?
Well, my record's clear. I use a phrase that they will say, yeah, he says this, he says it often. I love you all very equally. I love you all equally, very little. And I say that to him. I picked that up from somewhere. But no, my record's clear. I was raised with a strong work ethic, and I expect people to toe what I toe, and that is discipline, order, and just do your best. If you don't, my record's clear. You will be disciplined, and that will be the end of the day. And if you're fair, if you're providing due process and you're providing it equally, you know what? I'll bet you 95% of the firefighters would say, good for him. They're like kids, not kids immature, but they're like a good team. They like discipline. They appreciate it because if it's equal, they know the expectation. And don't let them get under your skin.
Carl, anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
Kurt?
There's one last question, and I think you've already answered it, but I'll read it anyways. It says, being an internal candidate whom is competing for this position with other internal candidates, what challenges may you see with being the supervisor to the other candidate that may have feel they should have received the job instead of you?
Well, how do you deal with them? Well, you shouldn't have to deal with them, because if you've been doing it right all along, there shouldn't be any animosity. It should be, well, I was asking to do the same thing you did, John. So good for you. So to me, if you've been fair all along, the dividend is there is no animosity. But if you had animosity, it's, hey, let's talk this out in the kitchen. How is your family doing? Hey, would you like to go for lunch? Would you like to have a cup of coffee? Down to earth, grassroots friendliness. And that's what I would do. Almost kill them with kindness, so to speak, and show them that you're just as human as you are. You have the pains in your family just like they do. And, that's how I would deal with them. Just basic kindness and friendliness. Now, if they don't relate to that, then you just, you gotta, you have to grab back into you gotta grab into your bag of intangible skills and say, okay, maybe we should have some team building trainings. I saw one that I want to do, and as you get a board with ropes on it, and you get teams of 4, and they lift the board up to move together. So there are some team building trainings that you can do that if that person's not responding to the basic friendly overtures, then do some trainings that create team building, okay? And maybe that will break it open, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the commission of the interim chief?
I just have one more question, John. You have I assume, a pretty decent law practice now. How are you going to square being a big-time fire chief along with a super-duper lawyer?
Well, it's a good question that I kind of solved about 1.5 years ago. I quit taking what was half of my time of the law practice and no longer practicing it, and that's called family law. Done. I don't do any motions. I don't do any difficult divorces, any of that. I'm done. I've been practicing for 31 years. Those cases are extremely stressful. The profession has definitely financially rewarded me. When I was 29, I settled cases in the multi-millions of dollars. 3 years later, I did it again. I've done it just last year, 2.7 million. Okay. Thank God I got my law degree. It has been such a wonderful degree. I can't think of a more flexible degree to have in your life. So at 31, I peeled off all those family cases, Carl, and I'm done with that. So right now, I've gotten to the point in 7 months that I easily don't have any problem managing the fire department and doing the scaled back semi-retirement law that I do. I didn't have court Tuesday. I didn't have court Wednesday. I don't have court Thursday, and I don't have court Friday. And I've been at the fire department. So for the, few hours that I might not be in the office during 8 to 4, they got me for the remainder 14 hours of the day. So I always produce. And that, again, if you have a ethical individual in the chief's office, you'll get the service out of him and her, no doubt,
Can
that
I,
the citizens deserve.
can I add something here?
Sure.
All the years that you were, as a fireman, coming up through the ranks and very busy as a counselor, you never had any trouble making your numbers.
Now, you know, when I was a sergeant, lieutenant, I was going to court 10 times a week.
Right, but you always made your
Oh, yeah.
numbers.
No, I've
And well beyond the average,
Oh, yeah.
well beyond
Oh, yeah.
what was required.
I always made greater than 50% of all the calls.
Always.
All of them. And again, I'm peeling that back because I think as an instructional tool and skill, you have to give your members the opportunity to hone their skills. Okay? And the chief is a big shadow on the scene. Let them improve their skills and their independence. And that's one of my strategies. Matter of fact, I did get a text when I first took over and I didn't go on the night calls like I used to. And one member said, wow, the chief isn't around and we get to improve our skills. Thank you.
Any other questions of the interim chief?
I have a couple, Kurt, if I may.
Sure.
John, in order to make it a level playing field for everybody that has been interviewed, a couple of questions. One is certainly the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We had 28 applications. John was not involved early on.
Mm-hmm.
We had 6 interviews. John was not involved early on. It was narrowed to 2 outsiders. I have had questions of me, and that's why I'm asking you, what caused John to go from outside to now having an interview and being considered as one of the 2 finalists, certainly by this commission? And I'd like to know what changed.
What changed was I was at the helm for 7 months. And being in that position, I saw the evolution of the candidates. And to me, of course, one is no longer a candidate, so to me, being a citizen, I saw the improvement in the fire department over the 7 months. I saw the curve and the bar getting a little higher.
What do you mean by improvement, John?
Well, allowing firefighters to go to outside training and paying for it. That was one of EMS instructor. Kevin came to me and said, would you pay for some investigating classes that I take for a week? Sure, that's part of evolving the fire department. He's not required to take that, but I thought it was essential. So the chief needs to send the message strong and clear that the fire department wants you to get outside training. That was not occurring. Now it is. That was not occurring. There were some interpersonal issues, so there was some stagnation there. I'm an educationist because of my degrees, so I think it's important. I said, I thank God I had my law degree. Well, I'm an educationist. I think they deserve to have their law degrees too, so to speak, figure of speech. So that has changed. Education keeps them vested in the fire department, keeps them engaged, and it gives them a home that they can say, you know, maybe I'll be the chief. You know, so that has changed. So over the 7 months, I saw the 2 finalists coming down, and look, I want to provide good EMS service, and the fact that I've been here for 7 months has given me the steadiness to have a stronger opinion about the fire department. And my strong opinion is neither one of those candidates are bona fide for Grow Zeal. I don't care if they live on Ferry or
I do.
Church. Well,
I do.
my point is, as I go back,
I live on Ferry, John.
yeah, I
Come
know
on.
you do. But my point is, they haven't been in back of an ambulance. The final candidate isn't even on a fire department. He's been retired for a year. Okay? And I don't think they're uniquely aware of the issue, the problems that you're posed with, and you can't learn that stuff by drive-by. Drive the ladder truck down Church Road, west of Meridian. I have, multiple times. Drive the ladder truck past your house, and you might find it in the ditch. And that could be a cataclysmic event. You could kill every firefighter in that ladder truck. And you don't learn that just by saying, hey, the ladder truck is 9 feet wide, but the road is 12. Look, you almost got to you have to be taught by looking at your white knuckles, okay, and going, I remember this for the rest of my life. And if you catch that curb with that tire, guess what? You're going to get pulled right into the ditch. You're not going to be able to jerk that baby over. So again, whether they live on South Point or whatever road on the Groves Hill, I just don't think he is qualified. Now, if you hire him, he's going to have to I'll have to mend my relationship with him. But I'll tell you, I love challenges, and if I can, it will just be a testament of who I am.
John, another question. I read the Department of Licensing Regulation Affairs rules as it comes to firefighters, firefighter training council, and general rules. 32 pages, not as interesting as the 400 that you probably read. But I was looking for qualifications. I know that Chris is probably as qualified or more than you are, respectfully, as a chief. And Tim has a different history and background. And I even think Kevin probably has some areas. You're going to be relying and leaning on those people. You have 36 months, according to the materials that I read, to become fully certified as a chief. That's a lot of continuing education credits. How, and I realize you've scaled back that miserable practice of law that we all enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
How are you going to get to the promised land in 36 months and know as much as Chris or Tim or Kevin and be the best fire chief you can be?
Well, first of all, the chief cannot chief comparing himself to other members. That can be extremely dangerous to managing. And by what I mean is, if the chief is going to constantly compare himself or her, that could create a state of mind that provides for an insecure chief. I think they kind of went through that recently, and it affected the confidence of the chief. So, Carl, when you say that, it touches off something that I am very aware of is not where you want the chief to go, hey, he's got a skill set, I got to match him or better him. Same with Chris and Tim. I'm a true believer in the Groziel scheme, which does work, in combined forces. Example, combined forces. Lloyd's is standing because the strategy of the Groziel Fire Department. On a Sunday at about 11:45, we got the call. Fire at Lloyd's. That fire was contained to that front partition because the fire marshal and Chris Davenport, okay, I talked to Chris and I said, Chris, just a week or two before, I said, Chris, we talked, hey, put a couple fire extinguishers in your Jeep. Lo and behold, Lloyd's went up Guess what? That fire was contained to that partition because Kevin and Chris Davenport, who just talked it out with me about the attack process of the Groesville Fire Department, go to the scene, make sure you have equipment in your Jeep. So you can see how I'm talking. It's a combined force, no ego, do the job. So to answer your question, it's not that I got to have the education that they have in certificates. I will be honest with you. A lot of those certificates are just sitting in front of a computer. Okay? If I want to lace the wall with wallpaper of all the certificates I can obtain, I'd need a bigger office. So the education for the Groesville Fire Department has to be dealt with without egos, without judgment amongst the crowd, the crew. And hey, I think the record was I went through the firefighter 1 and EMT 1 and 2 and got voted on quicker than any firefighter. So, if it's about certificates, I'll be your man. But, I can do that in 36 months, no problem. I love a challenge. You know who my mother is, right? Okay. So.
Carl, any other questions?
No, just a quick point. And John, with that, I believe that education is just one part of it.
Yeah.
Experience is another part.
Yeah.
And I also recognize a lot of the issues that you've had with that particular reference. And I just want to say thank you for coming in here today and making an excellent presentation. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else from the commission? Do you have any questions of us,
No.
Chief?
No.
All right.
We got a meeting to do.
We do. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break, just so everybody can take a break. We'll come back at 8:06, and we'll conduct the rest of our meeting.
What's your last 5?
three sets of minutes. We have May 11th meeting minutes. We need a motion support.
I move.
Moved by
Second.
Dallas, support by Jerry. Questions or comments with regards to the May 11th, 2023 Fire Commission meeting minutes? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carried. We have May 23rd. That was a special meeting of the Fire Commission. It's a one-page set of minutes, or I'm sorry, 2 pages. It's in front of you. Is there a motion?
Mike,
Okay.
Moved by Jerry. Is there support?
Sport.
Support by Dallas. Questions, comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carried. And we have the May 30th special meeting minutes for the Fire Commission. Is there a motion?
Move.
Moved by
Support.
Jerry, support by Dallas. Questions, comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carried. Moving on to our expenses. Approval of the expense report of May 2023.
I move.
Second.
By Dallas, support by Jerry. Questions or comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carried. Moving on, we have one action item tonight is recommendation to the Township Board for a full-time fire chief position. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Oh, Kurt, go ahead, Kurt.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion to recommend to the Township Board that interim Fire Chief Camilleri be appointed as the full-time fire chief at a salary commensurate to the position and as determined by Township management.
I support.
Motion by Kurt, support by Dallas. Questions or comments with regards to that motion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Motion carried. All right, moving on to discussion items. Chief report. Interim Chief.
Well, for the month of May, we had 59 EMS calls. For the month of May, we had 13 fire calls. We have passed our EMS license. We had an audit last week in-house. We passed with flying colors. Our ambulance was inspected. Equipment was inspected. Our supplies was inspected. Our SOGs was inspected. And all the licensures were inspected. There have been some action items for repairs and replacement at the DPS building. The request for bid for repainting and resurfacing the DPS roof has been published in the News Herald. Repair and replacement of the gutters has been published in the News Herald for a request for bid. A request for bid has been put on Mitten for a new ambulance. We have received 7 requests for documents regarding the ambulance from 7 different vendors. Yes, today there was an in-house question and answer session at the fire department at noon. One vendor that we had already met from Kodiak showed up, had some general questions, and that was it. 12 new EMT radios are arriving soon. They're in the hands of the state of Michigan to get their license and frequency set. We have a job fair coming on July 29th, 2023. Again, a priority is always to obtain new EMTs and firefighters for the fire department. It takes a long while to train them, so you gotta act, be headed before the curve. And the last and most honorable item I'd like to mention is to commend Dave Hill for 50 years of service on the Grozio Fire Department. Dave Hill has provided the citizens of Grozio with excellent EMS and fire service. And Dave Hill was thanked last night at a private get-together just for him. So thank you, Dave Hill, for all your service. That's all I got to say.
And just with regards to Dave Hill, obviously he is at a gas station on the corner of Macomb and Meridian on a regular basis. When you see him, thank him, right? 50 years is a long time to give service to this island, and it should be, we should all appreciate it.
Yes.
Next thing on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to preside or present public comment? No, we'd love to hear you, Tim. Just for the record, just state your name and address.
Tim Lorraine, 7929 Siding Court. First thing I want to tell you is that thanks for letting me speak. This is the second time. First time was to thank you for supporting the millage, which obviously passed and has helped us out a great deal. I did not talk to John about what I've written down. nor did I talk to Carl, but it addresses quite a few things that they brought up. And unfortunately, I have to put on a set of spectacles to be able to read it. So I took a half a day off from work, so I apologize for taking up your time. But I said I'd like to break my allotted time into 2 segments. I'll only use a short amount of time for the task at hand, the interview of the interim Chief Camilleri. I actually thought public comment was going to be before the interview. Because I consider him to be a friend and will not bring personal feelings into my time at the podium, I can tell you that this department is in much better condition than it was in December of 2022. We've implemented a recruiting process that is starting to bear fruit. Equipment is getting repaired. Members are going to school. We've had face-to-face conversations with our police department to improve our mutual service to the citizens. I can honestly say that Chief Camilleri is the catalyst behind these improvements. I'd like to spend most of my allotted time concerning the hiring of an off-island fire chief. First, for 20 years, we had a chief that was probably the best bargain the township ever had. He loved his job, and I doubt most people in the room realize the time that he put into this job. I would leave for employment off-island at 6 in the morning, and his car was at the station and his office light was on. He washed trucks, stocked ambulances, medical calls at 3 a.m. He was there. He was actually the first on scene, not just standing around. He'd hand the ambulance crew a slip of paper with vitals, histories, etc. I mean, he made patient contact. He didn't stand around and say, "I'm the boss." Same thing John does. John gets in the back of the ambulance. John directs people. He's pulled people out of the ambulance if it's been a serious call. And we have someone that's maybe young in there, or he'll ride as the third man. So he doesn't walk away from that, and I think that's an attribute. The council or commission may be thinking that the commission or the council may be thinking that that's what officers are for, wash trucks, get in early, do things like that. But the problem is that when you go over the bridge and you go to either one of the municipalities there, their sergeants, their lieutenants, their captains, their chiefs make substantially more than a firefighter. Here, if you come with an EMT license, you get a benefit package, same as the deputy and assistant chief does. So the officers here take those positions out of a sense of duty, and they do the best to lead those below them, not for a higher pay or to position themselves to collect a retirement and move on to another department. I did not discuss this with John, but one of the things that he talked about was laying off, letting senior members, he'll look down at I am responding and see that Kevin's on his way, or I'm on his way, or there's 3 or 4 senior people. He doesn't have to get up. So that's something that Duncan couldn't do because, let's face it, Duncan was kind of a control freak. It's nothing I haven't said to his face, and he was really good at it. John doesn't feel that need, and I'll tell you, 18 years ago I came to this department fully trained. I was asked 3 times to become a sergeant before I accepted the position. In fact, Duncan came to my place of business and closed the door of my office and said, you've been doing this for a while. We really would like you to take that. Became a lieutenant, and in March of this year I became the deputy chief only because the interim chief, Chief Camilleri, and the current, at the time, the current deputy chief, now the assistant chief, Chris Davenport, along with the president of the association, asked me to take the position. I was elected by the membership, and I assure you it's not a popularity contest. I can be pretty hard on these guys. There's many times that John has to pull me back. But I think they know that I have their best interest in safety at the forefront, as I do with the citizens. And that's why I think I became the deputy chief. This is so unique. I started with Brownstown as a volunteer. I worked for Riverview for almost 12 years. I was an officer in Riverview. I've never seen a process like this in my life. When I became a sergeant in Riverview, I interviewed with 5 people, 3 outside chiefs, my chief, and a city administrator at the same time. We were asked situational questions. We were asked questions on EMS. We were asked about fire safety. We were asked about fire tactics, something that I didn't see happen even here with the chief. In these chiefs' interviews. So it's been unique. I'm not saying it wasn't fair. I'm not saying it wasn't, it was just something very much out of the ordinary that I had never seen before. I'm not sure that, I think we were more, what I found was we were more concentrated on, did you have this degree? Did you have that certificate? I have degrees, but that has nothing to do with this. We are so unique, and you have to have a relationship with the men. You have to have their respect. And if you don't, they're not going to perform for you. They don't depend on their livelihood. And you can't treat them the same way you would in a department with 200 members. That's going to be kind of hard to carry over from an outside chief. And a couple of things I wanted to address. I've been doing this for 40 years with 3 different departments. I grew up in Brownstown. I responded to calls as an 18-year-old in high school. My pager would go off and I'd get to leave school. It was kind of cool. But then I worked for Riverview, and I've been here for 18 years. I heard rumors that, and they're obviously rumors, but I'd like to give you some information that maybe you're not aware of. I've heard rumors that we need to go paid on call or part paid. Let's put it into perspective. We can barely get applicants now. Woodhaven is looking for 6 basic or paramedic firefighters, and they start at over $22 an hour. They have 6 openings. They can't fill them. 4 Western Wayne County departments are double digits short on personnel, and they start at over $70,000 a year. It costs that department over $100,000 for each firefighter because of the cost of retirement, the cost of benefits. These 4 departments that I'm talking about have all had to go to 2.8 multipliers. 2.8 multipliers. We have a gem of a situation. I look at it from a taxpayer standpoint. We've got a pretty good thing going here from the standpoint of what it costs the citizens of Grosse Ile to maintain the system that we have. And I don't think, you were presented with 2 applicants. There were 6 selected from a committee, and I knew 4 of them personally. I've been doing this for 30 years, and actually over 30 years. But the 2 individuals that did interview, guys from their department called me, asked if I had any influence. I said, nope, I'm a little pea on nothing. I don't have any influence. But I will tell you that I have confidence in John, and and that's bringing my experience to the table. Chris Davenport has confidence in John, bringing his experience to the table. And one of the other options that I've been heard thrown out is that, well, maybe we'll do a paid-on-call option. Well, I actually polled 70% of our active department and asked them individually about paid-on-call. And I'll tell you, 50% of them said I'd probably be done. So we would lose 50% of our department had we decided to go on a paid-on-call program. I've also heard about bringing in a private ambulance. Well, before COVID, Riverview went before COVID and before Riverview went career, they couldn't man their shifts, and they brought in a private dedicated to the city at $100 an hour. That's $2,400 a day, which is $876,000 a year. And the private keeps the fees from the ambulance. They don't let that poor person that it's January 2nd and they go to the hospital and they haven't reached their deductible and copay with Medicare. They're not going to say, we'll help you out. Can you make it on payments or get it excused? They're going to send them to a collection agency. So they're going to make over $1 million. They're going to bring in over $1 million, basically over our budget. And here's the thing that people don't realize that needs to come to the forefront. If you did go to a private ambulance, dedicated here, that ambulance takes a hangnail to the hospital, and there's a heart attack down the road, you don't have mutual aid. The Downriver Mutual Aid Agreement says that you get services that you can provide. Southgate, that does not transport, and Lincoln Park, that does not transport, has to guarantee payment to another city if they don't get another response unit in there from a private. And that means you pay the full boat. You don't get a discount because it's a Blue Cross discount or the Medicare or the Medicare. You get the 100% allowed by the state of Michigan. Anyway, I just wanted to bring those points to this commission, and I sincerely hope that the commission votes in a way that that allows us to continue this type of service, allows the guys, the members, to interact with the chief, knowing that he's in the same position that we're in. If you get a guy that leaves at 4 o'clock, and I'm not saying that we would get that kind of a person, that person's not going to get the respect that someone from Groseal is. I mean, we even had one of your applicants that you didn't see is a retired battalion chief and happens to live on Groseal. Would I still want John? Yeah, probably, but at least you had an alternative that fit that bill of someone that lives on Groseal. And you didn't get a chance to see that person. Anyway, I appreciate the time to talk, and I thank you all.
Thanks, Tim. We appreciate you as our deputy chief. Any other public comment? All right. Bring it back to the table. Any questions, comments from the commission?
I have one comment. Tonight, in our midst, we have some newly retired and longtime retired firefighters came out in support of John. And Groseal's fire department has always been a generational, familial type of arrangement. The sons of the firefighters have come into it. And that's been one of the biggest factors in the success of a volunteer department. Nobody really has a volunteer department any longer that is successful, certainly not like this one. And I think it's testament to John and how he spoke tonight and how he's turned things around. And I think as an added bonus here, we have some members that have left recently that may consider coming back. Plus, I think we're going to wind up picking up some of the sons or daughters of these members that have either retired or are still active. So I think we really have a big plus in John, and I think to his credit, he's grown into the position. He's now comfortable with it, and I think he really is the best choice. This is a very good and fitting succession to Kenny Fisher, to Duncan, and Kenny from Joe Miller. I date back to the Kenny Fisher days, so I think we're, as a department now, we're actually back on track and have the ability to never mind the nonsense and get on with business. And we've heard of all the things that can be done, so I think now it's just a matter of getting to it. So that's my thought.
Thanks, Kurt. Anything else from the commission? If not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Move.
Moved
Second.
by Dallas, support by Jerry. Questions, comments? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for staying with us for 2.5 hours.